ISAF, NATO's International Security Assistance Force, now 11 years into Afghanistan, occupying Afghanistan as part of the global war on terror in 2001. There's been much debate in the last few years as to what the current purpose of the mission is. With the withdrawal of troops scheduled for 2014, many argue that Afghanistan will still be a failed state with the potential of increased chaos once the Afghan security forces are completely in charge themselves. Are the Taliban just as much of a threat as they were in 2001? Well, joining me now to discuss what is needed for continued stability in Afghanistan is the last UK ambassador to Kabul. In fact, he left there last month. He's here right now. Sir William Patey. Welcome, William.
Thank you for having me.
Starting in the light of all that we just said there, what is the target of what we're doing now in Afghanistan, and how close to success or failure are we?
Well, I think the target hasn't really changed, and then your introduction very rightly takes people back to 2001 and the reason we're there: national security, getting rid of the Taliban, who were host to Al-Qaeda. That is an important objective, but also to leave Afghanistan in a position to make progress over the coming years, so there isn't a failed state, that it doesn't resort to either ungoverned space or to a regime that is sympathetic to domestic international terrorism. And I think we have made huge progress. I don't accept that when our combat troops leave in 2014, the Afghan forces will not be able to handle the residual security threat. And it's
but they would be unable to handle it if the rest of the world didn't come up with $4 billion.
Absolutely, and we have to be clear about that. If we don't continue to provide support for training and the funding of the Afghan security forces for a number of years beyond 2014, then we are asking for failure. I'm absolutely clear about that. I'm confident we will raise the $4 billion. Britain has already announced a contribution of over $100 million. There's a NATO conference in Chicago coming up later this month, which will hopefully lay the foundations for gathering the $4 billion that will be necessary.
Yeah. But the situation doesn't really look as good as it sounds when you talk it. I mean,
you see, I've spent 2 years in Afghanistan, and I've seen the areas where we are winning in terms of building institutions. The Taliban used to gain support in places like Helmand and Kandahar because there was no government to speak of. There was nothing for the people to turn to. The Taliban were the only alternative if they wanted justice. Well, over the last 10 years, that has changed. Particularly over the last 3 years, we see provincial governance in places like Helmand. Every district has a district governor. There's a prosecutor there. Schools are opening. Clinics are opening. So the Afghan people now have a stake in, they can see what their government has provided. And provided that government continues to use the assistance that they're getting from the international community to deliver the basic services to their people, the offer from the Taliban will appear very unattractive.
At the same time, how great is Taliban's support, let's say, at the moment in Afghanistan compared to 2001?
It depends. I think it's much less than 2001, and obviously it depends on which part of the country you're in. I mean, in the north, support is minimal. Taliban are finding it very difficult to operate in parts of Afghanistan now. They don't have the safe havens they used to have. They've just announced a new spring offensive. Well, this follows on from their last summer offensive, which was a failure. The Taliban are unable to take and hold ground. Now, the question is, when the international troops come out, will they be able to overcome the Afghan national security forces? I think they'll find they're delusional if they think they can wait us out and then overthrow the Afghan army. The Afghan state that they will face in 2015 is a very different one that they faced in 1996-97 when they took power. The institutions are stronger, the army is stronger, it's better trained, it has international support, and provided we fund it, they will confront a very different situation.
But what about the future? The thing we started with was really that if the countries do not come up, and ISAF countries and so on, come up with the money, everything you positively said falls by the wayside.
I think so. I think Afghanistan is in balance. It's a very poor country. It's had 30 years of conflict. It had high levels of illiteracy. All these things can't be reversed in one generation. It hasn't yet developed its mineral resources. So it won't be able to afford the infrastructure of a state that has been established over the last 10 years without outside help. So even then it'll be difficult. Even with outside help, it's not a given. But I would certainly predict that if the international community does not continue to fund at a much lesser scale. I mean, let's remember the sorts of money that's been poured into Afghanistan now is 10, 20 times what we're asking for in 2015. So for a 20th of the cost of what we're spending now, we can finish the job. If we don't do that, then I would predict a slide into failure.
That's right, yes. And the thought of wives sometimes are quoted as saying, you know, it is maybe expensive, this coat may be expensive, you know, but, you know, look at how expensive the other one was. So this is cheap.
It's not quite like that, but, you know, I think that the parallel the wife might say, this coat was expensive, but do you want me to run around the streets naked? Yes. So it's not comparison with another coat. Yeah. It's comparison. This coat is needed to keep me warm. If I didn't have this coat, I would perish in the cold. That's what we're talking about in Afghanistan.
Right. Well, we'll see how this follows up and so on. And the situation you're talking there about not taking our eye off the ball, I hope also that this weekend Queen's Park Rangers, your team, does not take their eye off the ball, because that would be very serious.
We're all hoping and praying for Queen's Park Rangers and my other team, Hibs, in the Cup final. So it could be a terrible weekend or a good weekend.
Thank you very much indeed, William, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.